Easily the biggest and most intriguing mystery so far from the new Pokemon Legends Arceus game is the identity of the new Professor character. Usually when we get introduced to a new game, we get the setting of the game shown to us, we get the player characters, we get the starter Pokemon, and most of the time we also get the Pokemon Professor. But this time we were not shown his or her identity. In addition to this intriguing absence, there are also some other factors going on with this Professor character that lead us to believe that there's more to this person than meets the eye, even though we don't even know who they are yet. And it seems like they're going to play a very important role past just giving you your starter Pokemon. That is why in today's video, we are going to be looking at who exactly this Professor character could be, and see if we can't narrow it down to at least a couple of possibilities. Now, in order to try and figure out the identity of this mystery character, we need to look at what we know about them so far. Even though we don't know their identity, there are a couple of character traits that we do know about them. Number one, they are seemingly the person behind your task in the game, which is to put together Sinnoh's very first Pokedex. Number two, they are obviously providing the starter Pokemon to you, and they also traveled to Alola, Johto, and Unova in order to get these three starter Pokemon and bring them to Sinnoh. And number three, and perhaps most intriguingly, they seem to use a symbol that can most prominently be seen on the jacket sleeve of the player character that seems to resemble that of the logo of Team Galactic, implying some sort of connection there. So these are the three and only three things that we know about this Professor so far. They have traveled to several different regions in the Pokemon world, they seem to have some sort of connection possibly to Team Galactic in some way, and they are tasking you with building the very first Pokedex in the Sinnoh region. Now with this information, there are a couple of different possibilities that arise. Number one, which is also the most general and most brief to go over, is a completely new character. Obviously, with this being a new game, this could very well be a totally new character that we have never seen in any way before, and that could be that. They could still be very important, but they might not necessarily be anyone we know or have a connection to anyone else we know already. This next character is way more intriguing, and that is because this Professor could possibly be an ancestor to a character that we already know from the Sinnoh games or maybe one of the other Pokemon games as well. And in this category, the two options that I personally see as most likely are either an ancestor to Cyrus, the leader of Team Galactic, or an ancestor to Cynthia, the champion of the Sinnoh region. As it concerns Cyrus's ancestor, the connection here is pretty obvious. As we stated before, the Professor seems to be using a symbol that heavily resembles that of the Team Galactic logo from the modern day, which heavily implies some sort of connection to Team Galactic in some way. It might not necessarily mean the Professor is evil, it might not necessarily mean that this is truly Team Galactic. We don't know what this connection is. All we know is that a connection of some kind seems to be likely here. And as such, an ancestor to Cyrus being the Professor naturally seems like a logical choice. Another thing that is also worth noting here is that we learn in Pokemon Platinum that Cyrus's parents were apparently elite individuals, and this is what ultimately caused Cyrus to become evil because he could not live up to the impossible expectations of his parents, who seemed to be pretty elite and pretty high up in whatever field they were a part of. And while this is admittedly extremely loose, this could imply some prominent lineage in Cyrus's family, which could also theoretically include that of a Pokemon Professor, possibly even the very first Pokemon Professor that the Sinnoh region has ever seen. As it pertains to an ancestor of Cynthia possibly being the Professor, this one is a very good candidate as well. Obviously, Cynthia is basically the face of the Sinnoh region as far as the human characters are concerned, and not only that, she is easily one of the most popular Pokemon characters of all time. So a Cynthia presence in some way, with it being either her herself or an ancestor, is very likely to happen in this game, and because we know Cynthia likes to study myths and legends, that could very easily translate into a professor role for one of her ancestors. We also know that Cynthia's family has been around in the Sinnoh region for a while, with her grandparents living in Celestic Town, which itself is heavily steeped into the lore and heritage of the Sinnoh region. So one of Cynthia's ancestors possibly being around during the time of this game is absolutely a possibility. And since we know, thanks to the reveal trailer, that the Pokemon League is not a thing yet in Sinnoh at this time, this Cynthia-based character couldn't exactly take up the role of champion just like Cynthia, because that role doesn't exist. So in order for a Cynthia-based character to exist in this game, which as we already said is very likely, they are going to have to take up a different role than that of champion, and the role of Pokemon Professor would be a very good one for them to take. And then come the wildest possibilities that I'm going to present in this video, and that is that the professor could possibly be either Cyrus or Cynthia themselves. Now the reason why this could be, starting with the case of Cyrus, is because as I stated in a past video, it's very convenient that this game is taking place in the past of the Pokemon world in a region that just so happens to have a legendary Pokemon that rules over time. So some kind of time travel is very possible in this game, in my opinion. And with the Professor character, as we already stated, using a symbol that heavily resembles that of the Team Galactic logo, there is a lot of circumstantial evidence here to suggest that the Professor might actually be Cyrus himself. It's a possibility that I don't think can be excluded at this time. And finally is the possibility that Cynthia herself could be the professor in this game. And very similar to Cyrus's case, there are a number of different reasons for why this is. Number one, it's very likely, as we already stated, that there is going to be some kind of Cynthia-based character in this game, simply because of her popularity and the fact that she's effectively the face of the Sinnoh region. Whether that is her herself or a relative of hers of some kind remains to be seen, but I think that fact is very likely. Second, just like the idea of a Cynthia ancestor being the professor, Cynthia could not take up the role of champion or the big final boss character in this game because that doesn't exist. So if she were to appear in the game, she would have to take up a different role like the Pokemon Professor. Thirdly, the Dialga time travel point that we mentioned with Cyrus can absolutely be applied to Cynthia as well, and then the biggest point as it pertains to Cynthia herself appearing in this game physically, possibly as the Professor character, has to do with a point that was brought up by Barbie Elite 4 on Twitter, so a huge shout out to them for this. And the point that Barbie brought up is the fact that the starter Pokemon in this game, Rowlet, Cyndaquil, and Oshawott, have already been stated to be starter Pokemon in this game because the professor went to their respective regions and found them there, and then seemingly brought them back to Sinnoh for this purpose. And the three regions that these three starter Pokemon are from, Johto, Unova, and Alola, just so happen to be the three regions that we've seen Cynthia travel to in the various Pokemon games outside of Sinnoh. She traveled to Unova in Pokemon Black and White, she traveled to Johto via the Sinjoh Ruins in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and she traveled to Alola to compete in the Battle Tree in Pokemon Sun and Moon. So as Barbie puts it, what are the odds that these three starter Pokemon, who are starter Pokemon because the professor traveled to their respective regions and found them there, are from the same exact regions that we know Cynthia has traveled to in previous Pokemon games, and then this game in particular is set in Cynthia's home region? If that is a coincidence, it is a massive one, and absolutely provides the circumstantial evidence at this time that Cynthia herself could be the professor. There's obviously a lot more details that we need to know for sure, but you absolutely cannot exclude her at this time, as wild and crazy as that is. So those are just a couple of options as to who the professor character in Pokemon Legends Arceus could possibly be. It's a little too early at this point to round it down to one character, but I feel like we've got a few really good candidates, so you're gonna have to let me know in the comments below who you think the professor is actually going to be. Also be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet for more Pokemon content, and you can also support this channel greatly and videos just like this by listening to my Pokemon remixes on Spotify and by watching my Pokemon Cardinal project here on YouTube, which is massively appreciated. And with that said, I will see you guys soon with another video, so until then, as always, thanks again for watching, I love you all, and I will smell you guys later.